It's a dimly lit room. The kind of room where schemes are planned. It's the kind of room where you expect bad things to happen. The kind of room where villains like to hang out. Now, in this particular room, there were 3 men gathered. 3 men gathered plotting revenge. When the youngest son of Vito Corleone said to his older brother, Sonny, "It's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly business." This statement comes from Mario Puzo, from his famous book, The Godfather. Made even more famous by Francis Ford Coppola in his adaptation of the book for film. Michael Corleone's line, "It's nothing personal, Sonny. It's strictly business." It's one of those lines or statements we've heard in our lives many times. It's a great line to deliver, but a horrible line to receive. It's nothing personal. It's just business. It's a phrase that's generally given by the enemy before he's about to do something. Saying, like The Godfather, where they're planning to kill a crooked policeman, it's nothing personal. It's strictly business. Now, obviously, I'm no businessman. I've not been to business school. But I understand that business can be cutthroat. Can be ruthless. There are decisions that go your way and decisions that don't. Business can be the survival of the fittest. People use any means necessary to make the sale, to cut the deal, to earn the profit. So you must be shrewd in business. You must be shrewd to get ahead. Keep this in mind as we rehear Jesus' parable. As Jesus tells us this strange story about the work of one particular businessman. This man uses any means necessary to save his own skin. One day, a fellow employee comes in to see the boss to report that the office manager is stealing from him. So the owner gets upset and calls the office manager in. Sits him down and says, "I hear you're stealing from him. Now you've got 2 weeks, and I'm going to audit you, and you better have an accounting for all the money." Now the office manager knows he's in deep trouble. But like most con men, he's too proud to beg. He's too soft to work. But he must do something to save his own skin. He knows he'll be put out on the street and left with nothing. So he schemes. And he comes up with an idea. It's one of those dimly lit rooms. The kind of room where sinister schemes are planned. It's that room in which the office manager calls in the best customers of his boss. And he sits them down and he says, "I have a deal for you." And here's his plan. He will cut their bills in half. It will bring in money for the boss. It will make the customers happy. And they will all be winners in the end because he will have his escape. His golden parachute, if you will, when he gets fired. Fast forward 2 weeks, and it's time for the audit. The owner takes out the new books and he looks at them and he knows exactly what has happened. The man has cheated him again. The office manager has conned him, but there's not a thing he can do. He knows all too well that he has been had. He calls the office manager in, sits him down and says, "You got it. You cooked the books again." And here's the surprise. The business owner doesn't correct him, doesn't throw him out again for cheating, doesn't fire him, but he says, "I have to admit, you're pretty smart. You pulled one over on me." Now, up to this point, the story makes sense, especially because of the greedy nature of our culture these days. It makes sense. We're all out for our own skin. But what doesn't make sense is why Jesus is telling this parable. And it seems like he's praising the office man. It seems like Jesus is praising his dishonesty. What in the world is Jesus thinking? Doesn't he know that getting ahead by any means necessary runs counter to the gospel? Doesn't it run counter to everything that Jesus has taught us thus far? So I invite you to look closely. You notice that Jesus does not praise the office manager or his dishonest behavior. Now imagine that single-minded focus that the office manager has for saving his own skin, for coming up with that scheme, that plan to make sure that he has a safe place to land when he's fired. Imagine if that sort of focus was used toward faith. Imagine every minute of every day totally committed to following Jesus Christ. Just imagine that this strange parable that Jesus is telling us is really asking us to imagine if we were totally focused on following God, like we are in saving our own skin. Then our faith in God would be more than just an hour a week. Instead, it would be an all day, every day. Our devotion, our focus, our hearts, our souls, our shrewdness put into serving God and loving our neighbor. So when we understand what Jesus is getting at, is he's wanting us to focus ourselves on our faith like we do our business, then we're free to turn our hearts, our souls, our minds, our wealth, our resources to the service of God and one another. Now let's be clear, I am not praising ruthless people. I'm not praising the Godfather, and especially don't recommend him for family movie night, or as an example for living, but I lift it up because the focus these brothers, this family has in their goal. I'm also not praising Enron and WorldCom or Bernie Madoff or Lehman Brothers or the countless other schemes and ruthless greed that we have in our culture. That's not the message. Because their greed and criminal behavior turns my stomach and makes me angry. is just imagine if we had that focus in our faith. If we were concerned about loving God and serving our neighbor as we are with padding our bank account, or building up our own empire, or making sure that we have a safe landing in our own life. Just imagine that instead of money being the goal of life, that all of that energy was then channeled towards following Christ, where Christ would call us. Just imagine that all those people, instead of looking out for themselves, were trying to follow God. You can imagine churches all over the world would be full. They'd be overflowing. There would be waiting lists to get a pew for worship. Just imagine if the energy of that office manager that he used to try to make sure that his soul was okay, that his future was secure. Just imagine if he used that focus on his faith. One of my mentors used to always say that he doesn't understand how people who are so smart, so gifted, so talented, that they run businesses, that they work hard, that they are success in their daily lives, and then they walk into church and it's like they turn it all off. They leave their brain outside and their passions are gone. Friends, God gave us gifts. God gave us talents and brains and passion. God gave us these gifts to use to build up our kingdom if we choose to. But God also gave us these gifts to use in the building up of God's kingdom. God gave us these gifts to follow Christ. And you know where Christ leads us? When we follow Him? He leads us to eat with outcasts and sinners. He leads us to heal the sick, to welcome the stranger, to visit the prisoner, to challenge the mighty and the powerful. That's where Christ will lead us. So just imagine what our world might look like if all of our energy and our talents and our focus was put into our faith. Instead of pursuing the American dream, instead of padding our bank accounts, instead of getting an escape route, imagine if we used that to follow Christ, to serve the least and the last and the lost. Just imagine. You see, after all, it's not just business with God. It's personal. Let us pray.